Let's talk about mutual fund distribution and the taxation of those distributions. A mutual fund is a pooled investment where there's many different investments within inside of portfolio. The mutual fund from time to time will do a dividend distribution. Whether the investor receives the dividend in cash or reinvests the dividend, it's still a taxable event in that year. So the investor has a choice to receive the cash and do whatever they want with the money, or reinvest that dividend into the fund. Now, it's a taxable event in that year. Another type of distribution that the fund can make is capital gains. Capital gains holding period is based on the amount of time the fund actually held the asset. Let's look at an example. If the fund bought AT&T shares for $9 a share, and they're now worth $16 a share, and the fund decides to sell the AT&T shares, at the end of the year, they will make a capital gain distribution to the investor. If the fund held the AT&T shares long-term, that distribution will go to the investor as a long-term capital gain, regardless of when the investor bought the mutual fund shares. So be careful. On a test question, they might say the investor bought the mutual fund shares 3 months ago, and the fund has just made a long-term capital gain distribution. How is that long-term capital gain distribution taxed to the investor? It would be taxed as a long-term capital gain. That could be a test point. Be careful on the reading that. Now, let's look at a little bit more on that. So whether you have a dividend distribution or a capital gain distribution, they're taxable in that year. So dividends are distributed during the year quarterly often, and capital gains are distributed at least once a year, annually. Whether the investor receives them or reinvests those distributions, they are considered taxable in that year. Jim, did you have a comment?
Yes, Dee, just a brief point regarding the distributions and how they are taxed. Everything is great. One point to keep in mind is this is why and how mutual funds can see their cost basis increase over time, where they have the distributions that, whether received again by the investor or if reinvested into the fund itself, either way is taxed. So once those funds, those distributions are taxed, that is considered then after-tax dollars, and that amount of money that's inside the fund at that point is then considered to be increasing the fund's cost basis.